Alright, what's going on, guys? Today I figured I'd bring you a video about the Ford swap and pretty much a pros and cons list about putting a Ford engine in the Miata, why you should do it, why you might not want to do it, and pretty much a basic like rundown of a pros and cons chart just so you guys could see if it's really worth your time or not. Alright, so first things first, my car is a 1997 Miata. And this engine is out of a 1991 Ford Escort GT. It's the 1.8 dual overhead cam engine. That's the only one that's going to work in your Miata. There's two engines that came out of the Ford Focuses, and one is a 1.9 single overhead cam engine, and obviously that is completely different. It won't work, and you don't even want to look at that stuff. So first off, let me talk about the Ford Escort engines like this and which ones you should get, and the differences in how it will change the swap in your car, and how some are more easier and some are harder and whatnot. So this engine right here is out of a 1991, like I said, and that makes things pretty hard because the 1991 1.8 is a little weird. It's a 1.8, but it uses the design from the 1.6 short crank nose. So you need to find a 1.6 crank pulley right here like this one, because the 1.8 one's not going to work. And when I got this engine, I didn't know that, so I had to go and find that. Another thing is the water pump is different on the 1991. So what I had to do is right here, I actually had to make a custom bracket for the alternator, because the water pump doesn't have the ear that comes off where the alternator should connect. It's not too big of a deal. I just used one of the bolt holes in the block that isn't currently being used and just made a little bracket. But that's something else to look out for. Another thing with the alternator too and the water pump pulley, since you have to use that 1.6 crank pulley, all three accessories, the alternator, the water pump pulley, and the crank, since you have to use that crank with the V-belt style, it's different than the 1.8. So you need a 1.6 alternator and a 1.6 water pump pulley for everything to work, which is also a slight inconvenience on the 1991 engines. So like I was saying, the 1991, it does have that short nose crank. So later engines, you should just be able to use all your 1.8 accessories, and it should be a lot easier. So that's one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is the Ford Escort engine. The stock cooling route right here is in the back. I know some people say the back is better. I'm not too sure which is better, but for ease and because I had a drift event to make, I just used the stock Miata one, knocked out the freeze plug right at the front, and just used the stock one and plugged up the back. Now let's talk about the pros and cons to the swap. On average, these engines are half, if not less than half, than a similar Miata engine. I got this engine from a junkyard with 40,000 miles for I think $350 or like $400, so super cheap. Miata engines around me are like $1,000, which is outrageous for a Miata engine, and they're just really good deals. You can find them in junkyards, you can find them a lot easier, and you pretty much know that if you had a Ford engine out of an Escort, it wasn't really beat on. So starting off with the cons of this engine, you pretty much need Miata 1.8 to do this swap, because you're going to need the oil pan, your intake manifold, the alternator, the pulley, and I think that's about it. But and the CAS sensor. But other than that, it's not too bad of a swap. It pretty much just goes right in as a normal Miata. You just got to swap everything over from your Miata engine to this engine. And other than that, it's pretty easy, and I highly recommend it for a cost-effective option. The pros outweigh the cons much more, as this engine is a direct fit. They're much cheaper. Like I said, they're usually baby because they're out of a Ford Escort. It's a cool factor. You pop the hood and you have a Ford engine in here, and people are like, what is that out of? How'd you do that and stuff? And it's simple because it's just a Miata engine, which is super cool. And yeah, so if you drift your Miata or track your Miata or have a turbo Miata or anything like that, and you want a cost-effective option, even to build an engine on the side, definitely go with the Ford engine. I know some Kias in the early 90s also use the same engine, and you could use those too. It's the BP 1.8. I'll put the specific cars maybe down here if I look that up, but there's a lot of engines that work in the Miata, and you don't just have to stay with the Miata 1.8 because it's kind of a waste of money nowadays since the Miata market is so inflated and Miatas are outrageous prices now. So this is just a word of advice. If you want to stay under the budget, get an engine that's the same exact thing pretty much. If you already have an engine or if you blew yours up, you could just convert it, and it's super straight to the point and you'll save yourself a lot of money. So I highly recommend the Ford swap. Hope this video helped you guys and gave you guys some more information about a cost-effective option for your Miata if you're trying to build it or boost it or want a new engine. And I hope this video helps out a lot of people. So if you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. I got a lot of videos about this Miata. It's a boosted Miata. I do drift events in it, and I kind of just do everything in it, burnouts, whatnot, and I built it to beat on it and drift it. So if you guys like content like that, make sure to sub. I'll see you guys in the next one.